Hello and welcome to another Born on This Day ASMR series episode celebrating 365 birthdays. So you get to have 365 birthdays a year. We are lighting the candle. Today is March 7th. The day of abstract structure. And excuse me while I look for my coffee mug. We will begin momentarily. We are, as usual, reading from The Secret Language of Birthdays by Gary Goldschneider and Joost. This video has no cleavage, absolutely none. No cleavage whatsoever in this video. This book is a work of personology. A day is a year, is a lifetime, is an age. Personology combines history, psychology, numerology, tarot, and astrology to form a personality guide for each person based on their day of birth. My plan is to make a video for each day of the year, incorporating what this book calls the grand life cycle, which is the complete cycle of seasons and days of the year, culminating in the complete age of man, or the ideal lifespan of wasting your time reading books and never living. If today is your birthday, happy birthday, but obviously we want every day to feel like your birthday and a celebration. So join me as I sit here and drink frothy coffee and get dehydrated. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you watching, and let's begin. Those complex individuals born on March 7th often live in a highly abstract world. Giving structure to this world is the great challenge which they take on in life. Those born on this day who are able to find a concrete form of expression for their thoughts can meet with great success. Although their minds generally remain free to roam over very far out and abstract issues, career-oriented March 7th people usually manifest their ideas in highly practical ways, hopefully involving the popular support and participation of those around them. But whether they are involved in down-to-earth activities or not, they can give the impression of living on another plane of existence. Not surprisingly, those born on this day usually lead highly private lives away from their work. In fact, the often lonely world of March 7th people is not an easy one to penetrate. Those who wish to be friends with them will find that it is necessary to be exceptionally patient and understanding, and above all, not too demanding. It is not that March 7th people find it difficult to give, far to the contrary, for they can be very generous, but rather that they do not react well to direct pressure being applied to them. Usually their reaction is to withdraw, both emotionally and physically. When they are attacked or criticized, March 7th people only defend themselves to a degree, if at all, before pulling back into their own safe space. They learn very quickly who they can and cannot trust, to be understanding and accepting of them. Somewhat secretive, however, they may be less than forthcoming as to what they expect from loved ones. For those whom they feel are deserving, March 7th people can be extremely giving of both their time and financial resources. Those born on this day are highly sympathetic to the needs of others on a basic human level, and thus justice and equality can be preoccupations of theirs. Though bound up with the concerns of their society, however, they are not the most social of creatures. They may find one or two good friends more than good enough for them. Some of the problems that March 7th people encounter include inconstant energy, lack of a rich social life, fears and instabilities, and a feeling of uncertainty about what it is they are meant to do with their lives. Once they are able, however, to direct their diffuse energies in one meaningful line of endeavor, they can go very far, both to the heights and the depths. Using their work as a wedge, they may even find themselves making impressive inroads socially. March 7th people need to remain in touch with the thoughts and feelings of their family, social circle, and society at large, and bringing their sense of care and attentiveness to bear not only on their work, but on their personal concerns as well. They can build quite an impressive sort of life for themselves. They may or may not ever find the right person with whom to share their life, but they can certainly build firm friendships which serve as outlets for their great need to share affection. The weaknesses of those born on this day, they are diffuse, withdrawn, lonely. The strengths of those born on this day, they are conceptual, sensitive, and giving. Sensitive, again, more and more sensitivity. And you know what I've said about this, that your sensitivity is like being awful. Like, originally awful meant full of awe, and now it's become associated with awful. It's like a misspelling of waffle. That's all that awful is now. You're no longer, maybe you are so full of awe that you can't even spell waffle correctly. And it's the same with sensitivity. Maybe you are so involved in sensations and being sensational that all you can do is pine for a place without sensation. I don't know. I don't feel like being clever today, but it sounded like a fun thing to say. I really gotta work on that head forward tilt action. I don't think my neck is close enough to the floor. Numbers and planets, those born on the 7th day of the month are ruled by the number 7 and by the planet Neptune. Because Neptune is the watery planet ruling visions, dreams, psychic phenomena, March 7th people can be rather unstable, particularly since Neptune also rules their sign Pisces, so you got double Neptune, double Poseidon action. Such strong Neptunian influences can make for sensitive, dreamy, and imaginative people who at times have trouble focusing their diffuse energies. Those ruled by the number 7 traditionally like change and travel. The planets. Astrology traditionally speaks of 10 principal heavenly bodies which can be viewed from the earth. The 2 luminaries, sun and moon. Today is the day of the moon. 3 inner planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and 5 outer planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. All of these, including sun and moon, are called planets, and each represents a different facet of the human personality. The names of the planets largely derive from classical Greek and Roman mythology and their symbolism from the gods and goddesses which they represent. Every planet serves as an astrological indicator as well as a heavenly body. In this book, the rulership of both astrological signs and numbers by planets gives important clues to the personality of those born on each day. Neptune was the king of the sea in classical mythology, and his trident is symbolized in the glyph of this watery planet. Neptunian people can be profound, dreamy, diffuse, and difficult to pin down. Fantasy-rich, the minds of Pisces and those ruled by the number 7 are often attracted to highly imaginative objects. Neptunian energies invariably exert an irresistibly magnetic influence, able to dissolve away barriers of a more rigid and absolute nature. And now for some stories involving Neptune, who also is known by the name of Poseidon. Mythology by candlelight. Cecrops. The first king of Attica was named Cecrops. He had no human ancestor, and he was himself only half human. Cecrops, lord and hero, born of a dragon-shaped blow. He was the person usually held to be responsible for Athena's becoming the protector of Athens. Poseidon, too, wanted the city, and to show how great a benefactor he could be, he struck open the rock of the Acropolis with his trident, so that salt water leaped forth from the cleft and subsided into a deep well. But Athena did still better. She made an olive tree grow there, the most prized of all the trees of Greece. The gray, gleaming olive Athena showed to men, the glory of shining Athens, her crown from on high. In return for this good gift, Cecrops, who had been made arbiter, decided that Athens was hers. Poseidon was greatly angered and punished the people by sending a disastrous flood. In one story of this contest between the two deities, women's suffrage plays a part. In those early days, we are told women voted as well as men. All the women voted for the goddess, and all the men for the god. There was one more woman than there were men, so Athena won. But the men, along with Poseidon, were greatly chagrined at this female triumph. And while Poseidon proceeded to flood the land, the men decided to take the vote away from the women. Nevertheless, Athena kept Athens. Amione, she was one of the Danaïdes. The Danaïdes, these maidens are famous far more than anyone reading their story would expect. They are often referred to by the poets, and they are among the most prominent sufferers in the hell of mythology, where they must forever try to carry water in leaking jars. So Amione was one of the Danaïdes. Her father sent her to draw water, and a satyr saw her and pursued her. Poseidon heard her cry for help, loved her, and saved her from the satyr. With his trident he made in her honor the spring which bears her name. Amione. When the victorious Greek fleet put out to sea after the fall of Troy, many a captain, all unknowing, faced troubles as black as those they had brought down on the Trojans. Athena and Poseidon had been the Greeks' greatest allies among the gods, but when Troy fell, all that had changed. They became their bitterest enemies. The Greeks went mad with victory the night they entered the city. They forgot what was due to the gods, and on their voyage home they were terribly punished. Cassandra, one of Priam's daughters, was a prophetess. Apollo had loved her and given her power to foretell the future. Later, he turned against her because she refused his love. And although he could not take back his gift, divine favors once bestowed might not be revoked. He made it of no account. No one ever believed her. She told the Trojans each time what would happen. They would never listen to her. She declared that Greeks were hidden in the wooden horse. No one gave her words a thought. It was her fate. It was her fate always to know the disaster that was coming and be unable to avert it. When the Greeks sacked the city, she was in Athena's temple, clinging to her image, under the goddess's protection. The Greeks found her there, and they dared to lay violent hands on her. Ajax, not the great Ajax, of course, who was dead, but a lesser chieftain of the same name, tore her from the altar and dragged her out of the sanctuary. Not one Greek protested against the sacrilege. Athena's wrath was deep. She went to Poseidon and laid her wrongs before him. "Help me to vengeance," she said. "Give the Greeks a bitter homecoming. Stir up your waters with wild whirlwinds. When they sail, let dead men choke the bays and line the shores and reefs." Poseidon agreed. Troy was a heap of ashes by now. He could afford to lay aside his anger against the Trojans. In the fearful tempest which struck the Greeks after they left for Greece, Agamemnon came near to losing all his ships. Menelaus was blown to Egypt, and the arch-sinner sacrilegious Ajax was drowned. At the height of the storm, his boat was shattered and sank, but he succeeded in swimming to shore. He would have been saved if in his mad folly he had not cried out that he was one, that the sea could not drown. Such arrogance always aroused the anger of the gods. Poseidon broke off the jagged bit of rock to which he was clinging. Ajax fell, and the waves swept him away to his death. Odysseus did not lose his life, but if he did not suffer as much as some of the Greeks, he suffered longer than them all. He wandered for 10 years before he saw his home. When he reached it, the little son he had left there was grown to manhood. 20 years had passed since Odysseus sailed for Troy. Pegasus and Bellerophon. In Ephyre, the city later called Corinth, Glaucus was king. He was the son of Sisyphus, who in Hades must forever try to roll a stone uphill because he once betrayed a secret of Zeus. Glaucus, too, drew down on himself the displeasure of heaven. He was a great horseman, and he fed his horses human flesh to make them fierce in battle. Such monstrous deeds always angered the gods, and they served him as he had served others. He was thrown from his chariot, and his horses tore him to pieces and devoured him. In the city, a bold and beautiful young man named Bellerophon was generally held to be his son. It was rumored, however, that Bellerophon had a mightier father, Poseidon himself. Poseidon, the ruler of the sea, and the youth's surpassing gifts of spirit and body made this account of his birth seem likely. Moreover, his mother, Eurynome, although immortal, had been taught by Athena until in wit and wisdom she was the peer of the gods. It was only to be expected on all scores that Bellerophon should seem less mortal than divine. Great adventures would call to such a one as he, and no peril would ever hold him back. And yet the deed for which he is best known needed no courage at all, no effort even. Indeed, it proved that what a man would swear cannot be done must not be hoped for. The great power on high can give into his hand an easy mastery. More than anything on earth, Bellerophon wanted Pegasus, a marvelous horse which had sprung from the Gorgon's blood when Perseus killed her. He was a winged steed, unwearying of flight, sweeping through air swift as a gale of wind. Wonders attended him, the spring beloved of poets. Hippocrene on Helicon, the Muses' mountain, had sprung up where his hoof had struck the earth. Who could catch and tame such a creature? Bellerophon suffered from hopeless longing. The wise seer of Corinth, Polyidus, to whom he told his desperate desire, advised him to go to Athena's temple and sleep there. The gods often spoke to men in their dreams, so Bellerophon went to the holy place, and when he was lying deep in slumber, beside the altar, he seemed to see the goddess standing before him, with some golden thing in her hand. She said to him, "Asleep? Nay, wake. Here's what will charm the steed you covet." He sprang to his feet. No goddess was there, but a marvelous object lay in front of him, a bridle all of gold, such as never had been seen before. Hopeful at last, with it in his hand, he hurried out to the fields to find Pegasus. He caught sight of him drinking from the far famed spring of Corinth. And Pegasus, as you may know, eventually became the one who would deliver Zeus his thunderbolts. Hercules traveled to many lands and did many great deeds. At Troy he rescued a maiden who was in the same plight as Andromeda, waiting on the shore to be devoured by a sea monster which could be appeased in no other way. She was the daughter of King Laomedon, who had cheated Apollo and Poseidon of their wages after, at Zeus's command, they had built for the king the walls of Troy. In return, Apollo sent pestilence and Poseidon the sea serpent. Hercules agreed to rescue the girl if her father would give him the horses Zeus had given his grandfather. Laomedon promised, but when Hercules had slain the monster, the king refused to pay. Hercules captured the city, killed the king, and gave the maiden to his friend, Telamon of Salamis, who had helped him. On his way to Atlas to ask him about the golden apples, Hercules came to Caucasus, where he freed Prometheus, slaying the eagle that preyed on him, eating his liver. Back to the Odyssey. Hermes had gone to carry Zeus's command to Calypso. He laced to his feet the sandals of imperishable gold, which bore him swift as a breath of air over sea and earth. He took his wand with him, which he could charm men's eyes to slumber, and springing into the air he flew down to sea level. Skimming the wave crests, he reached at last the lovely island which had become for Odysseus a hateful prison. He found the divine nymph alone. Odysseus, as usual, was on the sandy shore, letting his salt tears flow while he gazed at the empty sea. Calypso took Zeus's orders in a very ill part. She had saved the man's life, she said, when his ship was wrecked near the island, and cared for him ever since. Of course, everyone must give in to Zeus, but it was very unfair. How was she to manage the voyage back? She had no ships and crews at command, but Hermes felt this was not his affair. Just take care not to make Zeus angry, he said, and went gaily off. Calypso gloomily set about the necessary preparations. She told Odysseus, who was at first inclined to think it all a trick on her part to do something detestable to him, drown him very likely, but she finally convinced him. She would help him build a splendidly strong raft, she promised him, and send him away on it equipped with everything necessary. Never did any man do work more joyfully than Odysseus made his raft. 20 great trees furnished the wood, all very dry so that they would float high. On the raft, Calypso put food and drink in abundance, even a sack of dainties Odysseus specially liked. The 5th morning after Hermes' visit found Odysseus putting out to sea before a fair wind over quiet waters. 17 days he journeyed without change of weather, always steering, never letting sleep close his eyes. On the 18th day, a cloudy mountain top arose up across the sea. He believed that he was saved. At that very moment, however, Poseidon, on his way back from Ethiopia, caught sight of him. He knew at once what the gods had done. But, he muttered to himself, I think I can give him even yet a long journey into sorrow before he reaches land. With that he summoned all the violent winds and let them loose, blinding sea and land with storm clouds. The east wind fought with the south, and the ill-blowing west with the north, and the waves rose up mightily. Odysseus saw death before him. Oh, happy the men who fell gloriously on the plain of Troy, he thought, for me to die thus ignobly. It seemed, indeed, that he could not escape. The raft was tossed as a dried thistle goes rolling over a field in autumn days. But a kindly goddess was at hand, Ino of the slim ankles, who had been once a Theban princess. She pitied him, and rising lightly from the water like a seagull, she told him his one chance was to abandon the raft and swim to shore. She gave him her veil, which would keep him from harm as long as he was in the sea. Then she disappeared beneath the billows. Odysseus had no choice but to follow her advice. Poseidon sent a wave of waves to him, a terror of the sea. It tore the logs of the raft apart as a great wind scatters a heap of dried chaff. It flung Odysseus into the wild waters, but if he had only known it, bad as things seemed, the worst was over. Poseidon felt satisfied and went off contentedly to plan some other storm somewhere, and Athena, left free to act, calmed the waves. Even so, Odysseus had to swim for 2 days and nights before he reached land, and could find a safe landing place. He came out of the surf exhausted and starving and naked, It was evening. Not a house, not a living creature was to be seen, but Odysseus was not only a hero, he was a man of great resourcefulness. He found a place where a few trees grew so thick and close to the ground no moisture could penetrate them. Beneath were heaps of dry leaves, enough to cover many men. He scooped out a hollow and, lying down, piled the leaves over him like a thick coverlet. Then, warm and still at last, with the sweet land odors blowing to him, he slept in peace. The seventh card of the Major Arcana is the Chariot, which shows a triumphant figure moving through the world, manifesting his physical presence in a dynamic way. The card may be interpreted to mean that no matter how narrow or precarious the correct path, one must continue on. The good side of this card posits success, talent, and efficiency. The bad side suggests a dictatorial attitude and a poor sense of direction. The Major Arcana. Far more significant are the 22 cards known as the Major Arcana, which cannot be associated with the modern playing card deck. They are in all probability a concentrated version of Hermetic philosophy as later interpreted in the Kabbalah, alchemy, magic, and astrology. They comprise the psychological study of man and his relationship to the world of the spirit and to the physical world. Their symbolism is a type of shorthand for metaphysics and mysticism. Here are truths of so subtle and divine in order that to express them baldly in human language would be a sacrilege. Only esoteric symbolism can reveal them to the inner spirit of the seeker. The Major Arcana are numbered from 0 to 21, each bearing a title which to some degree describes the card. Each card represents a distinct principle, law, power, or element in nature. The designs on the cards also illuminate the life of man, his joys and sorrows, hopes and despairs. They further indicate a search for the wisdom which enables him to control his passions and help in his transition to higher spheres, where he enters into things of the spirit. Any book on the occult will be more readily comprehended. Any of these cards of the Major Arcana can be the foundation for a great deal of meditation and inner enlightenment. In addition to this, be convinced that there is some power present when the cards are read that directs their distribution, an extra physical power, known and demonstrated as psychokinetic effect. Kinetic effect cooperates with the unconscious muscular activities of the person using the deck and tends to affect the cards as they are shuffled and cut so that when dealt they fall into positions that have significance in relation to the subject to the reading. The Fool, card number 0, can in a sense be compared to the Joker in the modern deck of cards, in that it has no assigned place in the deck, but stands more or less alone. Some writers on the tarot, in order to carry out their own interpretation, place the Fool between the 20th and 21st cards, or as the 22nd card, but there is no concrete evidence that this card belongs in that position, or for that matter as the first card of the Major Arcana. Rather, this is a separate card, a third part of the deck, the sum total of all. The Fool is the sum total of all. The Keys. The Chariot, Key 7. An erect and princely figure rides under a starry canopy in a chariot drawn by 2 sphinxes. He carries the wand of authority and the will. The shield on the front of the chariot bears a symbol typifying the union of positive and negative forces. The white sphinx is a symbol of mercy, the black one of stern justice. Both the carnal and spiritual urges are under the strong control of the charioteer. The car symbolizes the combination of heavenly and earthly powers. The human personality is the vehicle through which the self manifests its dominion over all things. He drives the chariot by the strength of his will and the magic wand, but the tension of his will may weaken, and the sphinxes may pull in different directions and tear him and his chariot in two. Divinatory meaning, conquest, success for those engaged in artistic pursuits, triumph over money difficulties, ill health and foes. Advantage for the seeker will result if he resists his lower promptings and masters his animal passions. It is a card of those who achieve greatness. It may also betoken travel and comfort. Reversed, sudden collapse of a project, decadent desires, perhaps an unethical victory. Vengeance. Health. Those born on March 7th must be extremely careful with their health. Because of their great sensitivity and their receptiveness, they are prone to many types of infections and allergies. These can ultimately overstress their lymphatic and blood systems, constantly forcing the body to react and defend itself. It is important for March 7th people to pay particular attention to their diet. Usually, restriction of dairy products helps in reducing mucus and phlegm deposits. A well-rounded diet featuring regular meals and an emphasis on grains and lightly cooked stir-fried vegetables will also help. As far as exercise is concerned, moderate to vigorous physical activity is advised relative to general condition and energy levels. Dancing is usually very suitable for March 7th individuals, along with all physical endeavors that involve graceful movements such as skating, swimming, yoga, and tai chi. Getting sufficient sleep is important to those born on this day, but they should not indulge in excess, since it can easily become a means of escape from the world. And that's interesting because I had usually thought of excess as meaning being more involved in the world or having more of a direction towards pursuing your particular goals, but I guess in a sense of being too focused on one side of your interests, I can see how that can be a means of escape. The whole thing about grains is they're converted to sugar, and so you're basically just eating sugar when you eat grains a lot of the times. It depends on the type of grains, and even stir-fried vegetables, it's better to drizzle oil on your food after you cook it, and it's better to steam your vegetables. So the health in food has been updated since this book was made, but that's just my opinion. Advice: strengthen your position, formalize your abstract thoughts, and communicate them to others. Don't get mired in self-criticism. Allow others into your private world and give more of your true self. Meditation. Following our dreams can lead us to freedom or imprisonment. Freedom is an oppressive force. Your dreams often act like a screen over you. And even the word prison is derived from apprehension, or mental capability. And prison also, as in prism, like a grid with a triangular base where there's only room for one at the top. Or prison, prying sun. A light, a constant reminder of light where you are contained. You are stripped of your identity, responsibility. And this is almost a freedom from the pressure of freedom. So when you follow your dreams, pay attention to when you are looking at a screen versus when you are setting the screen aside and stepping out into the valley of the real, the land of the prying sun.